and we should be live now, I think. So rather than me waffling and going, are we live or aren't we?
Yeah.
Have a sip of tea.
Talking about mince pies and whatnot. Let's just crack into it. So, hi everyone. I hope this is live when I'm doing the introduction. Thanks for joining us again on another live stream for the Deorgard Kickstarter campaign. We've got something a little bit different tonight. We've got our concept artist, Max, joining us. So say hello, Max.
Oh, hello, chat. How are you doing?
Hopefully the chat will kick off. As I say, there's a little delay. I think it's about 10-15 seconds, I think, of a delay, but I'll keep an eye on all of that. But yeah, tonight, guys, we're just going to sort of talk about Max's body of work, how we met Max, working with him on the sci-fi project, but most importantly on Deorgard. And then we'll have a little chat about this rather interesting little movement that's been developing from him this year, root to vegetable based. But let me just click on that and check we're going. And slideshow is up. But as usual, guys, like, ask us any questions you've got. We really wanted to bring Max on to talk about this, one, because we've really enjoyed working with him, but also I think it's a very underrated part of the creative process. I think that the concept art and the art in general, and it's something that we've put a lot of time and energy and resources into since we started miniatures production, was either concept art or actual artwork of the models and stuff, because I think it really does add to a project, gives it a lot more sort of grounding, and it's also just, it's really good fun. Well, it is for us anyway, and we'll find out whether it's as fun for the people we're working with in a bit. But I'm just gonna have a quick cup of tea, and Andy,
I'm absolutely
hello.
What tea you got?
I've got scalding hot black coffee. It's horrible. But
Coffee at 7 p.m. Unbelievable.
I was gonna say,
I work late.
You've got like over 50, haven't you, to drink coffee at night and not have horrible adverse reactions.
So much.
I nearly made one because I wanted one, and I was like, oh no, I can't.
I got Earl Grey here. It's delicious.
Far too relaxing. You'll fall asleep.
I did a podcast interview last night with the Two Ps guys, and unfortunately the recording failed halfway through, so it went on a little longer than expected. So if I'm a little croaky, that's why, because we're up to about 1 o'clock or whatever doing that. So anyway, enough of that. Let's a bold choice: no coffee after 3 p.m. for Greg in the chat. That's pushing it for me, if I'm honest.
I agree with that. 3 o'clock's a good choice.
Hello, Greg. Hello. Yeah, I've got pop-out chat now, so I can actually see what you're saying. Good.
Oh, cool. Yeah, if you've got it up, that would be grand as well. I'll keep an eye on it while we're having a natter. Yeah, guys. So I think let's sort of talk about how we found Max, or how we were introduced to each other. A few years ago now, 4 years ago.
Yeah, quite a while ago.
Something like that. Now me and Andy were talking about doing the first miniatures range, the sci-fi range, and we needed a concept artist. And we were new to the business. It's not necessarily the easiest business to, and we sort of weren't entirely sure where to start with certain things. But I'd been on Twitter. I like using Twitter a lot for my personal hobby. I quite like the sort of engagement you can get on there. And I'd noticed this artwork that Max had been doing for a Warhammer Tomb Kings fan project long time ago now. And I just really liked the style, so followed him, and it sort of went on. And then when it came time to sort of look for concept artists, I just sort of said, well, Andy, there's this chap on Twitter that I follow. I like what he does. Should we reach out and see if he fancies having a go? And if I'm right, Max, at the time you hadn't done concept work, you'd done art work.
Yeah. No, I was pretty much new to the business. I just sort of left a really, kind of depressing 3D visualization. I don't know, some sort of making sort of games that never really went anywhere, which was fun, and it wasn't fun. But yeah, no, I was just trying it out, and I drew some Tomb Kings pieces, which was my first sort of foray into like fantasy art, because I hadn't drawn anything for a
Oh,
while.
really?
Not really. I sort of, sketching on and off, but not like proper pieces. And yeah, and then you were my first like concept job. Now I do it all the time, and it's interesting, isn't it?
So that's right. We had him first, all right.
Yeah.
So when G-Dub snaps him up and all the rest of it, like they
Oh,
like doing
no, I've not done any
everywhere.
Games Workshop concept stuff. I've only done the big illustrations. I would love to do some concept stuff for them. I'd give dwarves like massive beards, and it would be perfect.
We'll get onto some hot dwarf chat later.
Yeah.
Don't worry, and we'll wait for Andy to.
When I go, yeah.
Yeah.
so if you just said then, I didn't realize you hadn't done any fantasy artwork before that, but
No, not really.
I'm assuming you have a real interest in fantasy.
Yeah.
Novels, TV, art, miniatures, and all the rest of it.
It's mainly goblins, to be honest. I really, really like goblins, which is, it's not just like, the green skin weirdos with the hoods. It's like, if it's like a cute animal with like a sort of sour expression, or an ugly animal with like a happy expression, those goblins is like the weird illuminations you have on the side of manuscripts.
Yeah.
All those little fillery things.
Yeah.
That sort of folklore, I absolutely adore it. And generally, you don't see it too much these days. Just because I don't know, just either the sort of the materials we're using, like it's all digital now. So like if you're working for games, you can't just slap something in the corner because that's going to take up like processing power. So those little things that might be in like a film that's just like a weird labyrinthine, I don't know, pet, you can't have that because it takes up stuff. And so those small oddities, which I feel make a world more sort of realistic, have gone. And so yeah, I'm trying to bring that back in my own little stupid way.
I like it. I remember the white dwarfs from when I was first in the hobby. I forget, I can't remember who the artist was who does it. It was one of the main artists, but he did these little doodles, exactly like you're talking about, these border doodles, really, that were much more cartoony, much more silly.
I think it was Gallagher, maybe.
Yes, I think it was.
I think so.
Yeah.
I love him.
And yeah, I still remember them now. Like those, they're just great fun, aren't they? And I think we've gone through this thing, haven't we, of the last few years where digital art is now so prevalent that perhaps we lost little parts like that, like those little nuances that you would have in a physical piece. So it's nice to hear you championing that. And wanting to
although I am 100% digital, I'd like it's 100% digital for me. It's just like how you use the medium, I suppose. It's just like anything.
Sorry, I suppose that's what I was. Yeah, was what I was getting at. I sort of wonder whether we got bogged down a little bit in the actual nuts and bolts of how to use it, rather than just using it to just a modern medium. Lovely. So that's how we came across you as an artist. And as I say, we reached out and we worked together on the sci-fi range. And one of the reasons we went with Max for that was we were quite keen for our sci-fi range to have that fantasy angle to it. We didn't want it sort of hard sci-fi. Certainly not this first crew that we explored with the first miniatures release. And that was something that Max sort of brought to the party, which was nice, which I went with him. But it did mean that we always, at the back of our minds, had the idea of doing the fantasy project. So I think when that rolled round, it was a fairly natural progression to talk to you and bring you on board for that one. But by that time, I think you as you say, you've been doing concept art for a few different people by that time.
Yeah, I had I sort of, I don't know. So by the time that you rolled around to the current project, the LV things, I'd worked on some failed projects and some ones that are still being made, actually, and some are already out, which is nice. You learn, there's lots of stuff to miniatures concept art that is completely, because I've designed stuff for video games. I've just designed characters for like putting in books and things. But for miniatures, it's so different. And then you there's loads of hidden things, like like how they might look in scale, because finding that out when I first started seeing the sculpts from the sci-fi range was interesting. It was like, oh, okay, you take my sort of weird flourishes and you turn them into more solid stuff. And it's like, oh, I've done a really spindly leg here. Okay, that would just snap off in real life. But it won't snap off as much because they're slightly bigger than like your traditional 28. So you're like, oh, okay, I can get away with these little things. Like, it's always about compromising. And so sometimes I now sort of over spindly stuff, over flourish things, because I know it's going to come back to sort of more restrained at the end product.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting design sort of thing. You kind of got to fight everyone else in the pipeline, sort of, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. And I know we've chatted over the years about, just as you said then, about the challenges of doing art to be used as a basis to create the model from, not just a cool looking piece of artwork.
Yeah. It's also really soul destroying. Like you've got to have like a heart of iron, like, because you do stuff that you love. Like you're like, oh, this looks great, and they're like, nah, it's rubbish. Try something else. Do it all again, and you're like, yes, great. But
we very
in the end, it does turn out better. Absolutely, like redoing stuff over and over again, and just sketching hundreds of stupid ideas, and you'll find it, and you'll collage something that's so much better than if you're just sort of stubbornly stuck with the first idea. Which is, it's kind of, but it's tough, you know. It's a tough thing, but it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, I imagine it is sort of. I think you were saying to me the other day this idea of ownership over artwork. How is that to be, albeit a very important part of a process, but it not necessarily being your creation, as it were. Like, how's that sort of compared to when it is purely your own?
It's different, yeah. For the work I've done for like Cubicle 7, like if I do a big piece of artwork,
and that's the GW Games Workshop role playing stuff.
Yeah, I did a really nice, I'm really proud of it. Like a piece of corn, the god corn, and that's like me. That's like big piece, get loads of freedom to do a nice, interesting piece. But like a concept stuff, it's kind of hidden. It's like at the end of it, you get to show people some really ratty sketches, and like that don't quite look like the final project. And generally, it's like sometimes you don't even want to show some of the stuff because you shouldn't, because then people will be like, "Why isn't that a model?" So it's all hidden. So you kind of just got to swallow it and just be satisfied in the end product. Luckily, like, these elves and the space people are amazing. Like they're absolutely fantastic. When I first saw these, was it Zola, the one with the big hat?
Yeah,
the robot with the big hat. It was like in real life and like in 3D. It was mind blowing. Also because they're really well painted. That doesn't hurt.
It helps,
but just seeing like something that's in your brain for that long and is twisting and changing and having ideas come in, and then to see it in real life is that's magical. That is really worth it. And then to see people convert that and take it in a new direction, that's even better. Yeah. So it's like I don't really care at that point. Like, I think sometimes the hard part is like when you just take ages and you design something really nice, and then it doesn't go anywhere, and that idea project fails, or maybe there wasn't enough interest or whatever. So that can feel a bit hard, I think. But like when you see the final product, it doesn't matter if your stuff was like thrown away. I'm not precious. Like, you got to chuck it.
That's it. I can only imagine, in 3 or 4 years' time, just the pile of rejected artwork we'll have. It's almost quite fun to think about.
That's the problem. All the concept artists I've talked to are just like, no, we can't show anything. I've got so many great things. Can't show anything. Like, I have to keep so silent. And miniatures take so long to make.
Yeah.
Oh God, I want to tell you about it so badly, but I can't. No.
It's interesting what you were saying about when you see the finished model, if it's been realised well, not necessarily wanting to put your scribbly, however you described it, scratchy, whatever, doodles next to it. But I mean, we loved your artwork. That's why we went with you. So we're biased to a degree anyway. But I think it's for me anyway, I do feel like the artwork for the elves is more, it's closer to the finished product.
I definitely think
you've done that, I think some of them, particularly like the warrior and the executioner models, like they're almost like when I was building the Kickstarter page, choosing what images to put where, there were certain ones off where I would put the concept art and then I would put the painted model underneath it, and they were,
it's learning, like, kind of like, that's, I guess, my experience showing, I guess, like if you compare the concepts to the like the first set of models, even the first elves I drew, because you learn, like, as a project goes along, you learn how the sculptors work, you learn your design language, and you kind of use up ideas as well as you go along, and have to think of new ones and more interesting stuff. It's nice though. Like, what have you got up on the show? Is it the Archer?
Got the Archer up at the moment.
See, I really like that. Is my favorite sculpt.
Right.
Well, I don't know. It's more just that for me, I can see that the sculptor has taken my ideas I haven't really fleshed out too much and added something of themselves to it that I wouldn't have been put in, and it works really well. And there's a harmony to it that I really enjoy.
So that was Ivan or Ivan. I don't know how he pronounces his name. Actually, I've not met the chap, but that was the only one he sculpted of the range. But one of the things that impressed me so much about that sculpt of his was, I think you're right. I think it's close to the art, very much so. But I loved how much he managed to do with the back of the model. None of us have ever seen. Until he did it. Like in that piece of art, we can see the feather cloak over her shoulder. And we knew we wanted feathers. As you well know, we're sort of obsessed with trying to get feathery clothes. And at this scale, the 54mm scale, it allows us to do a lot more with textures like feathers and furs and things like that, and snake skins, as we'll come on to. But I love he just went to town with those feathers on the back of the
really nice.
And it's a really rewarding miniature to look at in 360. I think it's I'm that's where my money is on the most popular one of the range.
Really?
I think it's very close, but I think that's probably where my money's been on the people's most sort of popular. I think it's just a really nice, and obviously that's going to sound biased and all the rest of it, but I think it's a really nice interpretation of an elf archer, and it's not something we've seen before. But it was really nice to work on. And I mean, that's a sort of finished and polished sketch right there. I think as we go through the slideshow, we'll see the slightly more scatter they're different, because how we get there, right?
So this kind of brings up, like, how kind of different concept artists work and what you need to do for different things. So for like video games, you have to draw front, back, sides, 3/4, all the props all laid out, because there's so many people in the pipeline. You can't really afford to rely on other people sort of, I don't know what to call it, like, or basically to fill in the gaps. You need to draw exactly what needs to be sculpted.
Right.
With miniatures, or with like really talented sculptors that we've managed to sort of accrue, you can relax a bit. You can be like, right, my job is now to sort of inspire them. It's not to say sculpt this. And although whilst that does come to it a bit, you can be like, oh, okay, here's an idea, here's a glimpse into this character, make it real, which is a much different way of working. And sometimes it works amazingly well. And I think that's the best way to get results. Oftentimes, that's from what I've spoken to and sort of read, the way the Games Workshop does it more often these days.
Right.
It's more inspiration based than sculpt this. Sometimes does happen.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it works much better for like natural or basic human characters than say robots. And yeah, it's interesting. Whereas as you go along, you'll see different different concepts have either, like you say, more sort of suggestions of ideas that you fill in the blank. It's up to you to put that in. Or they might be, okay, just draw this. This is exactly what I want. And yeah, it's interesting. It's a weird way of working.
Yeah, it is a weird way of working, and I found it a really fun way of working. I'm pretty sure you have as well, Andy. Like the back and forth and all of that. And I do feel that one of the roles we've had to learn to improve at is this sort of overall direction of it. Is to basically go. We need to find a good artist that gets us, and then we need to find good sculptors that get that, and then a good casting place and all the rest of it to actually realize it. And that's a very fun place to be. I imagine. So I've worked in theatre and film and whatnot in the past, and I think it is very similar. I think art direction, it really is like direction. You sort of assemble the cast, and then you do it's you never want a heavy hand on a play or on a film or a TV show, because you don't get the best out of the cast that you have, and that was really fun. Well, particularly fun on this project, because we had more than one sculptor working on it as well.
Yeah, that's
and again,
interesting.
you were 3 years further down the line of this type of work, as were we than when we did the sci-fi range, and of course we did this elf range as a one-er, as opposed to over a period of time.
That changes it up as well. It's interesting.
Very much so. So we've got a few people asking a couple of questions. Nice to see everyone here. So hi, Stefan. Good to see you again. And Greg saying, obviously, you need to obey the NDA, obviously.
Yeah. Stay. You sign something, you stick to it.
Adam's just back the other day. It's going to be a tough choice to choose just one. Well, I mean, you could go for the 4 minutes.
Yeah, I would honestly get the lot.
Yeah,
because no, you should, because like say you buy it now and then you're like, right, I'll leave it, and maybe let's say you paint it and you do really well. You're like, okay, it's one piece, but like the whole thing is like it's a collection together. They kind of designed to work off ech other.
Yeah, and we've picked them, haven't we?
The way they're posed together, the way maybe suggest, get
I think it's a very good idea. Very wise.
Yes.
Kane's asking, Max, have you seen any of the box art, and if so, how do they compare to your picture of the
that's really
we found that particularly strange, because we've said on a few streams, me and Andy didn't give the box artists any direction at all. We just found painters we liked. We said, look at these cool models, what one do you want? And then let them go with it. And then the first thing we know is one's come back purple, one's come back yellow, one's come back.
Yeah, I love that.
Green and purple, yeah.
They're so different. Let's see if I can find an example of. I think. Did you see I don't know if Kane, you've seen the elf with the giant antlers, the sort of purpley one.
The woodsman.
The woodsman.
Yeah.
Rodrigo, that is.
Yeah, like that. That's completely different to how I pitched it. I pitched it in a sort of classic sort of lush greens and mosses, and but with more sort of like maybe a very pale turquoisey skin.
Oh,
sort of like just as very like almost like it's ethereal, like ghostly, but not quite. Basically like my skin, really. Like I'm really pale, like even paler than I am.
You'll be happy, Max, with what.
Yeah, but with sort of an ancient quality to it. But the versions that are on the box art, and there's also a more sort of autumnal version I've seen.
Yeah,
they're much more rich, and it suits the sculpt better, because the sculpt is a bit heavier, a bit more sort of active and masculine, rather than sort of the sort of more fey version that I did.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting as well. And because it's 3D, it's much more chunky than a sketch, like an expression-y sketch. So that was, I think that was this one, the biggest divergence really. And so it's interesting. What I'd really like to see is someone do some really interesting sort of stuff with the horns, like make it completely lush, like do a seasonal thing where it's like budding flowers, find some real flowers, get them on there, add some real lichen, literally like go to town weathering wise, and that'd be really interesting to see. That's kind of how I picture it in my head, at least.
Yeah. Did you see Scott from Miniac painted up another version?
Yeah,
and the spider web, Yoo-hoo spider web.
I didn't think of that. That's really interesting. Yeah, because it's kind of inspired a lot by Arthur Rackham and a lot of my sort of classic English southern countryside. Those sort of spindly trees that you see every so often. So it's not sort of a lush sort of fancy elf. It's more sort of a pan-like creature you'd see sort of dancing around in the background that you wouldn't quite be able to glimpse. Sort of it hates you with sort of that sort of arrogant elf-like qualities.
Yay!
Yeah,
like me.
It's interesting when we had Dave Colwell on the other last week. It was Dave who painted the 54mm version on that incredible water base and all the rest of it, and he spoke a lot about wanting to get across some of that Fey character, to them. It's the you've walked out into a clearing in the forest and you've just seen this thing which is at the same time utterly terrifying and monstrous, but also quite beautiful. It's I'm glad he's the sort of poster elf of this first release.
I like it. Like if you've ever been walking in the forest and you see like a stag that pops up, they stand exactly still and they just look at you, and they're like, this thing, if it wanted to, could probably rip me apart. It's got massive horns, antlers, not horns, antlers. But it doesn't. It just stays there, really tall, and just looks at you. And that's the sort of feeling I want to try and get across. And I think that what you've managed to achieve with the painters and the box art is crazy. I could never paint anything as good as that.
We could be more happy, and we've got 4 more to show this week, including another version of Deorgard, which is just awesome. I think whilst we're on this sketch, we can talk about that spindly thing. One of the things you've done with other artwork, both stuff you've published and stuff you haven't, is this. The horns we're seeing on this guy, not the antlers, the actual horns in the foreground, and some of your more insectoid stuff. You put these lovely spindly bits on. I was really impressed that they managed to get that in the sculpt. And again, I think it's just as you said earlier, because it's that bit bigger than a 28mm model, have on the model, and they're still relatively robust. It's not like the classic resin 28mm model that you look at it wrong and it explodes. So what we got going on in the chat? Mike's hi Mike, see you in here again. Mike's just saying he'd love to see the woodsman with body paint all over it. Yeah, so in the concepts, he's got a lot of sort of woad style swirls and things, hasn't he?
I'm on it.
So that was interesting. So I wasn't sure whether the sculpt. So this is sort of the bit where the interpretation comes in. It's like I could have done it without that, and sort of like probably we're just going to leave it there. But like I wasn't sure whether they would sculpt that in.
Oh, right.
And I thought I'd leave that up to interpretation. It's like okay, so that's something that maybe I don't know exactly what would be best here. Because like if you sculpt the detail in, it's easier to paint, but it limits the options you can do with it.
So that's interesting what you're saying. That's a classic one where Andy will often step in during the process, right? And you'll be like, no, I want it smooth. If they want that on there, you paint it on there.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think if the sculptor had put that in, 100% would have said take it away, because it's easy to paint on right, but it's not easy to remove. So I think it always frustrates us with other models when it's got a cloak with a symbol. You just end up sanding it off for ages. So I think that's the balance at all 3 stages, right? But it's quite cool to have it in the concept, because you can replicate that with the paint, and no one's done that yet. So that's kind of a nice thing to have on the concept, but leave off the sculpt, I think.
Yeah, and it's also you're trying to sort of tell a bit of a narrative. So it's like, okay, this character is a bit ancient. It draws from sort of maybe Celtic or sort of old Iceni. Is it Iceni? The old British sort of style of painting yourself woad, which is it's a very different sort of thing in your mind. And the idea is to sort of, I'm just trying to influence you. So like when they're designing the sword, I've just sort of suggested what the sword is like, and they're like, oh, okay, it's got sort of woad paints. I know what that looks like more from that era, and so you can shorthand a lot of stuff that way, which is
exactly. I think that'll answer one of the questions Stefan's just asked about the creative process, as it were, for the art, and that's. I've said in a couple of streams or interviews that we've done now, this idea of you can have a huge amount of backstory and lore and reasoning and everything behind the character. That doesn't mean you have to show it on the model. It doesn't mean you have to write about it. I think providing it's there early on and everyone in the creative process is aware of it and adheres to it, you should end up with a model that gives off that vibe. So exactly like Max is saying there, the suggestions of this woad or whatever that's on him, the suggestions of the sword being a more Celtic type design, all these things come together, and you work with good enough creatives and with a gentle touch of direction to make sure everyone's sort of going in the same direction, you should end up with that result without having to ram it down people's throats. This is a wood elf, this is how and it's I think it's what's going to make it really exciting when they do finally get out in the wilds next year to people, because as we keep saying, there is no right or wrong with how you paint them. If you were to turn around and paint a wood elf pink, then there would be a fair amount of uproar. But with these, you really can go to town. You can sort of interpret it in any way you like. So let's grab another question for you, Mike. So Max, do you paint miniatures? And if so, how does it compare to working on digital art? Do the skills transfer?
They kind of transfer, but not in the direct way. Like my freehand skills, pretty bad, to be honest. Not great. I can paint checks. I can paint a lot of checks very quickly. But it's more sort of, it's a place where I go to paint miniatures is to relax and sort of not think about it. It's very much like painting by numbers for me, because the actual miniature exists, which is so much easier than when it doesn't. Like to draw something from concept is you have to actually make the whole thing. It's like the horns don't exist. Like you've got to work out how they work. But I get a model with some horns. I just paint the horns. I can color them in. Like I don't have to think about it. And it's so nice to be able to do that. It's how I relax. I'm also kind of a very lazy painter. I'm always looking for shortcuts. So sort of like the more shortcuts I can use, the better. And then I spend my time doing a bit of freehand on a tiny little piece, which sort of draws your eye. Which I guess is that you kind of get like sort of transfer skills there, because it's more about sort of composition. Like you understand that you should have a focal point in most of your art, and the rest can be a bit sort of less interesting and should be less interesting, and the line should all sort of draw the eye to one place, and you can turn that into your miniatures. But you can also turn that into your army. So let's say you've got a standard, I don't know, Imperial Guard army with some tanks and knights and things. Because the bigger things will draw your eye, you don't have to paint all the small guys as well. And you can put their banners to sort of suggest you look upwards, and put motifs that sort of tell stories as you sort of gaze at the army. Then you look at their banners and you're like, okay, some motifs there. And then you look at the tank and it's like, oh, there's some more motifs. And look at the big knight. And then that all comes together. That sort of compositional thing is probably what I draw from most than like actual skills, because they're really different. Like I couldn't competition paint. I just would fail miserably. It's a whole set of skills. There's like understanding of lighting is like really important. If you want to get better at anything, lighting is good. The best skill, if you want to get like 1,000 times better with no effort at all, horizontal.
Hang on. Now we might do this as a stretch goal. Hold on, Max. Let's.
Oh dear. No, it's the best cheat. It's honestly the best cheat. It's like get a mirror or get like if you're working digitally, flip it, reverse it. Constantly do this. Don't just do it once. Do it like every few minutes. It's just hold it up to a mirror because your brain plays so many tricks on you. It sort of assumes where things are, especially with humans and their faces, that you have to break it. And so if you keep doing that, your painting will be 1,000 times better. Like it's so much easier, and it doesn't require any skill because what you're doing is stopping your brain from tricking you and making assumptions and seeing the model for actually how it is.
Another perspective.
Like, if you flip your own face, you'll be like, oh, my moustache is completely asymmetrical. Like my face is kind of smushed. But when I see it normally, it's like, oh no, it's just what you expect to see. And so you're trying to break that. And all you need to do is hold it up to a mirror and to do it lots. It's really easy. It's good. That's one cool skill I use all the time.
Well, there we go. That was worth tuning in for. Tonight. Yeah, that'll do. And that's it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. There you go. Now everyone knows how to get better at painting. Job done. Let's have a look at some of this questions on there. The Woodsman with that one. Sorry, I'm still not that hot on reading the comments as we're going. Trying my best on it. Does this guy sleep standing up? Do you mean Max or the Woodsman?
Oh dear. Oh yeah. Well, the Woodsman with the elves don't sleep. What?
I had pictured this guy.
No, elves would probably just stay still, and then leaves and moss would grow over them, and they would sort of become part of the environment. You'd see, is that a tree? And then it would sort of look at you, and you'd be like, oh, that sort of thing.
Is that a wolf?
Ooh, yeah, yeah. Like the same way trees don't sleep. Well, no, trees do fall over. Yeah, so it probably just falls over and rots and grows again.
There you go, Brian. Bet you weren't expecting that one. So we go on that. Cool. Okay, so let's move through a little bit then to the actual creative process that we would go through with the elves. So we've had a look at these two chaps now. Let's take a look at the warrior in Dryson. And interestingly, this bit of artwork, the helm on this is different to the helms we went through in the end. I love it. Yeah, and this is, I think it's fair to say, this would have been a sketch earlier on in the process than, say, a sketch like this. So we would go to Max and say, right, Max, we want this samurai-esque elf. We want him to have we're looking at beetles as being a big inspiration to the forms of his armor. And at the early stages, we hadn't decided whether we wanted to go fully anthropomorphic with all of the elves, or whether it was just going to be like a familiar, like you have with a hawk for the archer, or whether, like this guy, it ended up simply being a design thing for his armor. So we would go to Max with that, and then Max would come back with something like this. So how do you get from us giving you that sort of bullet pointed list of what we fancy to this? And this we can answer, I think, one of the earlier questions as well with that. Let me see, who was it who asked it? Matt asks, when you're starting a sketch, do you start with more broad shapes and then refine it, or do you like to start with it a bit more formed?
So I'm more in this, it's hard to sort of describe that, because I work slightly unconventionally. Like, it's not uncommon, but it's not the norm. So normally you would draw out line art, and then you refine the line art, and then you keep adding stages to it until it sort of assembles itself in a very sort of rigid and sort of standardized way. Don't work like that. I'm more of a splodge artist, I guess is the best way to describe it. So I kind of splodge a load of shapes and then sort of carve into it almost. So like you say, yeah, I will like knock out some basic ideas that are just like real suggestions of things. I'll like get a huge amount of resources, like pour through loads of books on armor, insectoid stuff. Like if you look, you can see his hand is almost sort of like a mantis, maybe an ant, the way the sort of wrist intersects. Yeah, intersects. And just sort of like try and suggest things to myself, and then do that, and then shrink it down so it's a tiny thumbnail, and then do maybe 20 to 30 thumbnails that I probably don't show to anyone. And then do some more research. Then from that, I look at those thumbnails and look for the best and strongest silhouettes. So you can see this one. So for this, you want to suggest maybe it's sort of stoic, very sort of arrogant almost, but martial in the same way. So he's not a barbarian. He's not jumping up. There's not a lot of movement to this character. There's also more like a praying mantis. So it's just ready to strike. And so you're looking for quite sort of rigid, sort of almost for this one, delicate shapes. So like the swords. So you could, I guess, looking at this, it's like one of the original ones had an incredibly long sword. And then so this comes from that. Like the sword was almost twice as long. Because when you shrink it down to a tiny little thing, it's like that's obviously the strongest one.
But you'll be pleased to know with that as well. The sculptor shortened the swords, and we went straight back to them. We're like, no, get
that's
that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Just make that sword longer.
Yeah, and then you work on. Then so you take your favorite one. Maybe you take a couple of ones. Maybe some will have better legs. Maybe some better eyes or whatever. And then you blow them up, and you start working on maybe the other shapes. It's like define the hands, define the body, define sort of. What I try and do is define where the weight sits. So it's sort of how you hold yourself. Like you can slump, which is a different character to like standing up. And once you've got that sorted, the anatomy kind of falls into place for me. Then I generally try and break it a bit. Like I will then like select some of it digitally and then move it around and try and recollage it, because sometimes you can be like, you can get stuck in your ways with ideas. You can go down a path and miss a lot of opportunities that you kind of I don't know the best way to put it. But you just get stuck in an idea you think is great and miss a lot that you might forget about.
Just get stuck in a bubble and a rut.
Yeah. I'm sure everyone gets that with everything they do. And with digital art, it's really easy to break that bubble because you can it's not like an actual painting. You literally just cut it up, move it around, swap it in. Like sometimes I'll take other bits I've worked on in the past. Like I've taken some of the elf bits from maybe the archer, push that back in. So it's like what works, what doesn't work. Can bring in the previous concepts from the other elves, see what it compares against them, because I've often found that you're like, this looks great, and you realize you're just drawing another version of a previous concept, and you'll be like, this pose is working so well, and you're like, I've done this, so you've got to work that out. Then once that's done, that's the hardest part. That's honestly the hardest part. Once you've got a really good silhouette, once you've got a really sort of nice pose and the weight is right, and it suggests what you want it to suggest, you can work on all the detail. And that's where more sort of reference art comes from, because the thinking of it is kind of done. You need to look at like how actual armor works, how insect joints work, sort of how like hairstyles and anatomy works, because as much as you think you can do it, references will always be better. Drawing from real life is 1,000 times, a million times better than just thinking it up. So even if it's just the rough shapes of like this sword, it's just, but the curve of it, you need to look at like samurai swords. What the naginata? No, that's a spear. Nodachis, the really long anti-cavalry saber things. You look at those and you're like, okay, see how they work. How would you draw one of these? Mess around with swords. I got loads of swords, so whip out the sword, do some poses, look at your own muscles, see how they work, which is really useful. And then that comes into play. Then you draw those in, and then you're like, that's not very good. Redo it, sort of send it back and forth to people. Like I'll send it to Henry, and you'll be like, okay, this is terrible. This is not working. It's not like because what you're thinking is working might not be what your client is actually wanting. and that's fine. And so you've just got to go, nope, try again. But what you're doing is you're building like something in your brain. You're like block by block, you're putting parts in of things you've remembered, things you say, things you feel, until you've got something you like. And then, you just draw it. That's the way I work. And then it just sort of hits your brain and you're like, oh, draw. Done. And you do that. And then, then the more boring practical stuff comes in where you're like, oh, okay, I can't really do the horns that big. Knock them down. Like, because it's at the end of the day, it's a real model. So there's a lot of things you've got to compromise. And that's how it works. And then you pass it on and it goes out into the ether.
Yeah.
And which is scary at times. You're like, oh.
It was definitely something where I think your approach to drawing and or creating the sketches made it a lot easier for us to give feedback and help steer it to where we wanted it to be. It's an awful lot easier to say to someone, oh, can you just knock that back a little, rather than sort of going, oh, it's good, but it needs something more, because what is something more? It's a lot easier to look at it and go, I love that bit, can we just tweak it? Or I love that part, but that will snap if you breathe on it, and those sorts of things. It was really interesting what you were saying about the posing for the models. That's something I think all three of us, as we've worked on the various ranges, are getting more and more experience with, is this idea of, a cool piece of 2D art doesn't necessarily make a great model. It needs to be paintable. You've done some awesome sketches for us that will never see the light of day, because again, they just to paint would be an absolute, nightmare.
Did you mention like I think this one originally was more sort of closed in, like the sort of like the classic samurai thing. And it's just a nightmare to paint, because all the ruffles and all the armor is all buried under here. So you have to open it out, even if you sacrifice things at the end of the day. Like it will be better as a real project, and that sort of compromise is interesting.
It's nice as well, because we in some of the cases we have gone to you with a very specific pose, idea, less often than less than more often, whatever I'm trying to say. But I think when it comes back and you've sort of decided on that pose, we give you a fairly succinct set of bullet points, initially, and then the process begins, the back and forth between us, and then we end up with something at the very end of the process. So when I was writing the flavor text for the characters to use for the intro films, the teaser films for each character, that I wrote those all as haiku, and that all stemmed from your decision of how to plant this model of this guy's stance. So his was the first one I wrote, and that idea of him being a sentinel, very stoic, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, hang on, maybe I could run this sort of haiku thing through the rest of them and play around with it. So I really enjoy that, the way it's come back round from this very simple, succinct sort of beginning to exploding right out with a million ideas, and then we end up with it right back at those few key points, so that when you glance, exactly as you're saying, when you glance at an army and you pick up motifs, you glance at the model and straight away you should get it right. What are we trying to get across with this? And I actually think he's one of the best ones for that immediate, but I think they all are. I find it easy because we've talked about them for 3 years. I find it very easy to picture all of these characters in situ. And that's something I'm really sort of proud and pleased with the end result. Sort of I can imagine very easily what the backdrops look like behind them, almost to the point of I can hear them. You can hear the wind with
that is a really interesting thing. So it's like there's a design philosophy, and it's an overall thing. It's not strict rules, but it's like you should try and hit all the senses of everything, even the ones you don't think, like sound. It's like, how do you hear describe like the chinks of his armor, like sort of where they clank or click is more insectoid than like big chunky plates, or less than, there's not sort of like the deserty elf, sort of how a snake would move. And then maybe for more sort of like environmental looking ones, like do you hear the rustle of the leaves in like the horns in the tree as the twigs break off? Do you smell, I don't know, like the sort of old leather on them? Do you want that? Or do you feel like the heat of the desert? It's sort of like her cloak is really shimmering and sort of twisting. It's like a mirage, which was probably an absolute nightmare for the sculptor, but like whatever. I don't. Sorry.
It was one of the best moments of the whole project when that came back.
Yeah. So you try, as well as like just seeing things, you try and hit all the other senses, because what it does is it triggers memories in your brain as well as the people watching it that sort of like link into other things that we all know. There's like a sort of a shared language that we're all sort of tapping into, which is like, so a lot of that's kind of as weird as a concept designer. At least what I try to do is you try and throw ideas into other people's heads. You're, as well as coming up with your own idea and drawing it out, you're trying to get more ideas from your ideas. It's like it should excite. It shouldn't be the end thing. It's like it's just the starting block. What I'm doing, because it's at the start of the pipeline. It's like you've got loads of different artists and designers and just people. Everyone designs a bit. It's like you've got to inspire them as well, which is tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, I bet. Good fun though when it goes well. So let's have a glance at some more of the questions in here. So Greg's asking, where did the super long ears come from? It's something I haven't seen before and really creates a unique aesthetic. So I think with that, it's, as I mentioned before, Max, these big sweeps, it's something that you have. And also because we decided to explore these elves not in a typical elf way with a lot of them, we wanted to be able to sort of just make sure people knew these were elves. Like it's, this is just a woman from the desert. This is an elf. This isn't just an archer. This is an elf kind of thing. And my favorite is where we used it on the wolf.
Oh yeah, the wolf's got really long elfy ears, because like I kind of want them to be sort of like a different species. These aren't humans with slightly pointy ears. They are exactly like, so the proportions of them are different to humans as well.
Yes.
Like their hands are much bigger, their heads are a lot smaller, and they're sort of ungainly, almost like an alien design, really. And they stand in different ways than you might think. Like they don't have a weight to them. It's like this, the Lord of the Rings thing where they're traveling over Erebus, the mountain, and Legolas is walking on the snow. It's like, how does a creature that is light as air like exist in the world? It like the clothes it wears won't matter in the same way that we do. It's like most of it is like symbolic and for show. These aren't wrapping up warm. Like they don't feel the same way we do, and trying to get that across was interesting. You're right about that. So like the long ears are just like a quite quick, easy nod to it.
Yeah.
And like if you look at this particular one, which is, I think this design is my favorite. I think.
Yeah.
Just from a concept art thing, it's like I love this one. Yeah. Whilst I think the Archer is my favorite end model, this is my favorite concept. I don't know. I just had the most fun drawing it, but she doesn't have incredibly long ears, but she has the long sort of spikes and other suggestions of eerie things. In the same way that maybe if you look at old helmets, people put themselves into it. It's like, it's not just a sheep face. Sometimes you'll have a moustache on the front of the helmet or the visor. It's like, as sort of cultures and people, we always put ourselves into the things we make. And so elf design things would be different from human design things that have different aesthetics, which is, you could see this in the way Games Workshop designs their high elves with the ellipses that they put in, like the sort of soul stones of the elder. Everything is elliptical with the big tall hats and everything. So that's the way their species of elves likes. That's their visual language. Whereas humans, we like square boxes, about this big, about that big. We love that. That's roughly about our faces. So our screens are roughly the same. Our clothes are all designed like suits and ties, and everything is all designed to that metric. So what you do is you think up to when you're working on several creatures that are all the same species but different. You kind of try and think, oh, okay, what can they share? Big ears. It's a nice easy one. Oh, so how do they breed their wolves? With massive ears, because they're like, we've got big ears. Let's give our wolves big ears. The same way we breed our Labradors to have the sort of sad puffy dog eyes. Like they don't have that naturally. So it's it's kind of that's the way at least my brain worked for them.
Yeah.
And like it's stuff that you just probably when you get the miniature, you're like, oh, it's kind of cool, and you never think about it. But it's like, why is it kind of cool? It's like,
yes. 100%.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do all this stupid thinking. It's like that's my job.
But yeah, that's exactly it, right? The proportions thing, I'm glad you touched on as well. Somebody made a comment early on about the proportions of the warrior, the samurai, sort of going, what does his neck's odd, or it doesn't make sense.
He's got a really long neck. Yeah,
it was really nice that someone else, before we even had to say anything, not that I, to be honest, can generally be asked to say anything with that type of thing, but someone else sort of jumped in and was like, nah, hang on, it's an elf. Like, and it's like, yeah, lovely, right?
Well, it's a balance. It is a balance. Like sometimes you can push it too far because it's not. It's like sometimes it can just be sloppy, like not understanding anatomy, and sometimes it can be. So it's a balance. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So one neat trick that I did for this elf is that she's got a very tiny face, and you'll see this on the new the big gianty boys, or you'll see this on most giant models, where the face is smaller proportionally even if you're making alien weird creatures to the base of the model. And what that does, it gives you a fake sense of scale. So the top is further away. You see this like the castle at Disneyland, that the top minarets are much smaller than they actually look.
Oh,
and so you're suggesting that it's further away, that it's standing, so it's standing away from you, and it gives that sense of arrogance, that sense of like, dominating the sort of things that's underneath. So that's a sneaky little trick. And because these are 54s, you can get away with that much better than you can in 28s. So it's like a design trick, that, which is kind of cool.
I think there's a few of your turnip.
Oh yeah, the cults.
We'll talk about that at the end of the stream.
Yeah.
The T28 Discord is representing.
Yeah. Hello,
let's have a look at some of these other questions. The unicorn potato. There's some really
good name.
Brilliant names that have popped up in these chats. Which character took the most iterations of artworks until we were happy with it?
It's the leaping one with the wolf, for sure.
Right.
Just because we're working with anatomy, which is a lot harder to draw. Like you can cover up a lot of stuff with clothes, but with like human bodies, got to be right. Even if it's an elf, it's got to work. And we went through so many weapon designs and poses and slight shifts, because as soon as you shift one bit, the whole weight goes, and because it's such a dynamic piece. And we're working with a different sculptor, almost probably more from the games design background, where it would sculpt exactly what I'd drawn. So that I have to work differently. Like if you put that in, you can see it has a different, it's more hard, more exact. Yeah, so it's a different, completely different sort of style of drawing, more line up, more like conventional way of doing it, with more notes and just like, and like there's things that they didn't include because they're ridiculous, like all the thorns in their hair, they
this one where obviously she was floating in midair, which would
that was more of a leap, so you would attach her to the wolf, but that wouldn't work. But that was just one of many ideas. And also, legs are really difficult to draw. They are like feet and legs and knees.
The other night,
struggle so hard over them because you've got land on them. with most artwork, if you ever look at most like paintings of anything, heroic characters, no feet. They'll all be in the mist or behind some bodies or something. It's because they're so difficult to draw. Like, oh, look at that wolf. I've slightly hid that foot behind a rock. Yeah, there you go, cheating. There we go. So I always feel bad for sculptors having to do them. But yeah.
I thought they did a great job with the sculptor did a great job with the wolf, like attaching it and keeping that pose that you've done.
Works together nice. Yeah. So and because for this one you're designing two characters to work in situ, and it's not like a mount and a rider. They can be different, so they've got to work by themselves, and they've got to work with all the characters.
Some mounted elves. That would be
Be good. And like also you've got the motions of things. It's like the great thing with long ears is that you can sort of suggest motion as like they're moving forwards. They're like speed lines that go up. So like the ones that are running forward you can point the ears that way.
The thorns are actually in the sculpt, Max. You might not have seen it, but
I know. I mean the little tiny ones that spindle off into the distance that would snap off without a trace.
Oh,
yeah. Like, but I put them in because like that's like sculptor goes, put them in because you can always take them out. Can't add things back in. As I've gone on as a designer, my sculpts have got more and more sort of detailed, I guess. Not detailed, cluttered almost. Like there's too much going on because I found designers and even myself sort of painting them, you take things out all the time. And so a concept that is slightly over, as long as it's got a strong silhouette, the more stuff you've got in it, like belt buckles or like weird shields or iconography and things, cram it all in there and it will be taken out. And it just allows, it's a safer option, I find, design-wise.
Well, we left the wraps around the legs
at
the top there. But I was interested to know, Max, what you thought about the sculpting of the anatomy on this one, because myself and Henry were really quite blown away with the anatomy of the muscles.
Yeah, like sometimes it clicks, and it's one of those things that like you kind of have to get right. It's a real challenge to get good anatomy when you have to do a lot of study. This is where like the sort of like fanciful artiness stops, and it becomes like a research job where you're just like, how exactly, in a really boring sense, do these shapes work together?
I think that's what we ended up going with, wasn't it? Is we drew up some gymnasts. I think we spoke about CrossFit athletes. Just those really powerful sort of female athletes. And it's someone in the chat actually. Mike's just mentioned he really likes the power in this figure,
which is not very elfy, is it?
It's exactly what he said. It's very unelf-like,
which is hard. So you've got to get the elfiness in it, which is that sort of fey, like you can try to imagine her running through like the undergrowth. So she's got some nature bits in there. She's part of nature, sort of, but in an aggressive stance. So she's just running through a thorn bush. But you keep the design. But what's nice having multiple things is that you can transfer the elfy design language to characters that aren't quite as elfy, and so it will make more sense, which is cheaty.
That bursting from the undergrowth. So that's, for instance, that is a bullet point that we have given Max for this character. It's literally sort of saying, and some of them we weren't as specific with that, but this one was literally, she's just burst out the undergrowth, to do this, and that was sort of, I think, a fairly good jumping off point for you, wasn't it, to then go and create, what we ended up with. But it's coming back. It's a long time ago, isn't it? This is
it was
2.5-3 years ago. We worked on these concepts, and it's coming back to me now. I seem to remember the foot caused.
Oh God, yeah, because the way it's landing, it's got to be real. Because it's got to support an entire model, really. It's very difficult.
Loads of photos, didn't we, of sprinters? We did the stages of the sprinters and shows. I think it was a triple jump.
I think I used a stopgap of Usain Bolt or something, didn't I? And we sort of were like, at what point are we having?
That's
triple jump stage. And which one wasn't it? Yeah.
That was good fun, that. The Unicorn Potato has said Lael's clothes, so the executioner model, reminds them a lot of sort of 19th century medieval sort of Moroccan, Jewish, Berber, that type of thing. And that's great as well, because again, with her, it was going to Max and saying, look, Max, what happens if we look at sort of Assyrian culture and desert people, the Berbers and whatnot? What can we do with an elf from there? We want snakes, we want scorpions, we want things like that. That's her spirit animal, for want of a better word. That was a lot of fun, that concept. It really was. I'm going to go back to her because I really like her.
Yeah.
I had another question.
Yeah, she's very so what I try and do is, rather than nick like another culture's ideas as much as I can, is kind of do it more from nature and how logically you would work in that environment. So she's very snaky. She has some deserty clothes, but there's some other stuff in there. It's not just nicking Assyrian culture.
Yeah,
she's got like she's got like snake scale, like a, what do you call it, tabard tunic. So the skirt basically, but her hair is in ringlets and big thick knots. Yeah, because generally, if you're living in different climates, you have different sort of hair. Really, that's how it works. And she's got a big cloak that sort of keeps the sun off, but is also sort of got a big whip, which is snake-like, like a tongue, which is, it's a bit obvious example. I think you mentioned like an Ouroboros for this one. Yeah. So I don't know how to pronounce it. So she's got like the ring, sort of the symbol on her head. Her whips are ring-like. The spikes on her shoulders are sort of coming up roundwards.
A snake being a starting point, but a snake's a snake. The Ouroboros, or however you say it, is a more fantastical idea, right? So that was something more fun to suggest.
Yeah, because like you sort of think it's like, okay, you're growing up around a load of snakes, you're probably going to make them into some sort of religious thing. That's just that one. I can't really describe that one a lot. That's one of those ideas that just kind of clicks. There a lot of influence from. So this is bad pronunciation. Sorry, is Yoshitaka Amano. He did the Vampire Hunter D artwork, and he's done a few other elfy things. The really heavy sort of eyeliner, eyeshadow makeup, the really sort of odd proportions. That was a big inspiration. Very amazing artist.
It's probably the most unique concept, I think, and it became the most unique figure. And I think it's probably the best example of a loose idea with the silhouette of the snake cloak and how unbelievable the sculpt came out. Yeah. And I wanted to ask Max what you thought when you saw that cloak in 3D.
It was interesting. I can't say, because I think I have to see that in real life 3D to get it. Because when I first looked at it, it was like massive. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, that kind of works. And then I saw it was more of it. I was like, oh, okay, this really works. This is much more sort of interesting than maybe even I thought. And then have you showed the box art for this one?
Yeah.
Like the paint job brings it completely to life. And it's just it's really interesting. It's odd seeing your work, because people take elements that you think, oh, okay, that's got to be in there. Without those elements, it completely falls apart, and they don't use them, and it works better than you ever thought. So you're like, oh, I feel a bit like an idiot now.
So let's stick another question in there then, because I think it fits in quite well with what you've just said. So Andrew asks, from your perspective as the 2D artist, if you could choose one or two things that you hope the sculptor gets or takes away from your concept, what would those be? So that's quite a broad question. So let's tie it in specifically to this model then. As you've said there, what are those things that if the sculptor hadn't done it or the painter hadn't done it on this model, you'd be upset about?
So it was, for me, it was the proportions, definitely, to get that sense of slightly alien looking. And I think they'd managed to do that pretty well. I think they'd save it for the paint job, really. I think that would be what I'd like the painters to do otherwise, which would cover maybe sort of the makeup on her face and the general flow of how it would work. So I won't cover that. But for sculpting would be the sort of magical transformative, maybe I don't know what you call it, mutating sort of look of her cloak. The way it's not, I didn't want something to just be like, it's a cloak. It's not. She's kind of appearing as a mirage. It's twisting and writhing like a snake is. While she's very still and stoic and sort of almost ambiguous, it's everything around her is twisted. And there's like faces in her cloak. The patterns sort of all cross and interact, and that came across really well. And I think if you'd missed that and just like imagine this without the cloak, very static, it would have missed the snakiness of it. The sort of
There's some fun when we got the models, when we got the casts from Big Child, the way that the parts have been broken down, it's really nicely done. But when they're in sub assemblies, some of them look really peculiar.
They do, yeah.
And so, for instance, her without the cloak, and Andy's said this a load, haven't you? That you're like the cloak just utterly changes that model.
Yeah, it is the model for sure.
And then the archer without the
cloak.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to see it in the hand, Max. I think.
Yeah. That's what I feel like. Like after seeing, because I saw the sculpts of the sci-fi stuff, I was like, oh, these are great sculpts, absolutely amazing, better than I thought. And then seeing them in real life, just like completely different. You just don't get it until you've seen it in real life. It's interesting. Someone's commented, this took 3 years. Making models takes bloody forever.
It does. Especially when
good quality
things like
stuff.
a pandemic.
You can pump out random robots. That's a bit harsh on people who make really good robots. But you can pump average stuff relatively quickly. But like arty stuff that actually has kind of, I don't know what you call it, like a soul almost, like where you've got loads of artists at every stage making artistic stuff.
Yeah.
It's
artisanal.
Even though it's still a product, it's like you've got people working at the best that they can consecutively. Yeah, it takes a while, but you get good results. So
yeah,
I don't think it shows.
You do. And also the fact that no artist I've ever met, whether they're a sculptor, a painter, a concept artist, an author, whatever, can remotely stick to close to a deadline. So you need to factor those
deadlines,
into
unfortunately. Like
can't rush the creative process.
What's the trifecta? It's like as long as you're nice, you hit deadlines, and you're cheap.
Yeah.
As long as you get two of those, you're fine. So you just have to just pick your battles, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it did take, it probably would have taken closer to 2 years had a variety of setbacks not occurred, and none of them within the control of any of us. It's why it's been funny, because as I said, we've, I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Australia when we were teaching some classes there, and I was waiting. I'd gone out a couple of days early, and I was waiting just to get rid of the jet lag and whatnot, and was just sat there with the notebook, scribbling down these initial ideas. And then as we were driving around the country, doing the various classes, we'd be chatting away in the car, about this idea, scribble that down. And then we talked to Max, and there's a relatively large gap between when our work was done with you and then when the work began with the sculptors.
Okay.
So we've almost had the excitement, that creative buzz 2.5 years ago on this project.
Yeah.
It's why it's now really nice to finally be able to share it with people and feed off their enthusiasm.
It's delayed. Yeah, that's the main thing as a concept artist. You spend so much time getting excited about a project, and then it goes, and you're left with like there's no happy ending, there's no bad ending. You just gotta hope, and and then you get it like 3 years down the line, and you're like, oh yeah, that thing completely got out, because you're constantly thinking of new stuff. You're like, that works really well, which is nice. It's kind of like what I'm hoping to be is more like canal boats. It's like as soon as you finish one project, you move on to the next thing, because they're slow, but they'll all come relatively after the other. So you just chain them together, and these slow-moving objects all start hitting.
I'd love a canal boat. I very nearly bought one actually a few years ago, very nearly. But my wife was like, "No, bricks and mortar, bricks like don't, you know." But that's a different story. So Gary's saying the artwork for the hunter reminds him of Chitara. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of Chitara there.
I did, to be honest, didn't think of that at the time. Could see it absolutely.
We like Chitara.
Yeah, no. I see. So it's interesting. Like we all share same design language. There's like basically everything's been done before.
Yeah.
Like Chitara is probably based off a million other things, like maybe some of Conan's, like Frazetta's, like damsels. Maybe like Red Sonja, she's based off. So that was probably nicked from there. But yeah, I just didn't think of it. That's kind of interesting.
But I think
so, Gary, you've got to paint one like Chitara.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Like a more. So originally, she had a very cat-like, wolf-like sort of animalistic face, and that, to be honest, whilst I liked it, didn't work with all the other more traditional-looking elves. And so that was an interesting design. So she probably could even look even more like Chitara. And also she's got the big 80s hair, or maybe 70s, I don't know, the bigger hair, which is what I was trying to sort of remember. You sort of go back to old fantasy, go back to the time where sword and sorcery was king. Barbarians walked around with swords and things, and everything was a bit simpler. So yes, I can definitely see where you get that from.
But it's another good example of, again, why the project took so long. And as Max has just said, it's because things have been done. You know, you're nearly always going to be derivative to a degree with things. You can take the very, very easy path and just rip something off straight away, and we end up with yet another insert this character, you know, model. But the challenge was then, and not to be different for different sake either. You know, it's going right. We like elves. What can we bring to the party that will be interesting, that perhaps hasn't been seen in this interpretation before, but is still recognizably an elf. You know, I think occasionally you see, and I think this often happens when you look at mythological or fantastical creatures from very different cultures, and you might have ones where an elf in one culture is a very beautiful fey creature, and in another one is much more like what perhaps we would think of as a goblin, you know, or an orc, or, you know, and then again it can be something again completely different. You know, it might be an ephemeral creature rather than, you know, ethereal type creature rather. You know, and I think that again it all adds to the time of the project, but it means we end up with something I think we're all very proud of at the end of it. And again, something that you glance at it and you don't just go, "Oh, it's a wood elf." You want to have a second look. You want to see what's all this about, kind of thing. And it also means that, you know, no one else can have done it better or worse. You know, if it's got your own. Yeah.
People have said like, that's definitely sort of I'm starting to develop a style of model, I think, and the way I work, it for better or worse, brings out certain things in certain sculptors, which is nice.
Lovely.
Just, you know, style.
So I think that probably wraps up the sort of bit I wanted to talk about with us working together on this project. You know, suffice to say, we thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope that's coming across in this conversation. It's quite nice just to sit and have a natter about it as well, because a lot of the time,
after everything's done, it's
focused. Nice. Yeah. And I think it's something that me and Andy do feel really quite passionate about, is this recognizing the artists that are involved in a project. You know, without all the right ones being in the right places during it, we wouldn't end up with the product that we've ended up with. And it's why on the Kickstarter we're trying to include as much artwork as possible. You'll have seen there's you're going to get some lovely artwork cards included with your models. The big box pledge has got a ton of lovely artwork. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is we will be adding in Pledge Manager the option to have various skateboards done with the artwork.
Oh yeah, that would look really cool.
It does. It looks amazing.
Yeah,
I'll stick up the I'll stick up some pictures.
That.
But artwork is something we love. Both mine and Andy's hobby rooms are covered in the little, and I think it's something Games Workshop have started doing relatively recently in some of their bigger boxes is including the art. But a lot of the larger scale miniatures producers for quite a long time have put little artwork cards in with it, and it's a really nice, fun, I think anyway, really fun sort of addition. But it's important, I think, to recognize it comes from, that is a very important part of the process. Oscar just saying, Max, you're looking dashing as always.
Oh,
the mustache
very much. I've got a dressing gown. It's bloody freezing here.
There we are. So let's move on, if you're happy, to something that's happened, we've got 10 minutes left. So something that's happened this year in your own creative world. Back, I think it was in February-ish or something, you popped up this slightly tongue-in-cheek dig, correct me if I'm wrong, at the burgeoning insert here 28 scene.
Oh yeah, it's my weird.
And Max tagged something with Turnip 28, and I thought I'm on board with that. I'm obviously a fan. I'm all about this kind of weird stuff. I love it. And I thought, that's fun, and sort of and repost it, and didn't really think anything more of it. And then a few months later, it's all of a sudden, I think I said to you, didn't I? I said, Max, you should check out this Facebook group called Grimdark Historical. I think you'd really enjoy it. I think it's right up your mustachioed alley. And then a couple of months later, there's other people I'm following doing these hashtag Turnip 20
it's
things. And now why don't you sort of talk to us about quite what it's turned into?
It's crazy. It's it was just like something I did on the side. It's like some concepty things. I drew this. Well, I kind of sketched this out on like the train up to an interview in Nottingham. Whilst waiting, I think it was at King's Cross for like 2.5 hours or something. Awful, like absolutely awful. Just before, I think February, just before the pandemic started getting really bad. And then it became mildly popular. I thought, I'll draw a bit more, do more stuff to it. And then suddenly I see people doing the models of it. And so these are mine, but I only recently made them. Like I sort of seem to have sparked something in everyone's collective, everyone is in our weird small community of I don't know, odd addiction to turnips. And then now I'm making a game about it, which you should play. I've got like a Patreon where I'm like releasing art and cool stuff. I'm going to make a little magazine, and I'm getting miniatures made, which is it's a whole thing now, which is crazy. From a doodle that I thought, no one's going to pay attention to this. This is something that's like a portfolio piece that I can put myself into it. I'll give myself, because most of my work is commercial. Really, it's trying to hit certain commercial things, and this can be my sort of relaxing thing. And then people are like, oh, actually, I quite like what you make without the restraints of, commerce. And so, now I'm drawing loads of turnipy-based things. I've worked out why I called it turnip. I completely, that is, I don't know if you can see that one. That is Todd. He is our sort of mascot. He was a once dashing cavalry officer, turned into a toad mutant after a heavy night. And I don't know why he has a bunny suit, but he does. And then he's facing off against a little walking shield man, which has got a sort of blanchy, and because it's very much inspired by the best of Mordheim and the old hammer and that sort of classic stuff I grew up with that just isn't around anymore. I'm just really enjoying drawing turnips all day, talking to people. You should join in. Look it up. 28. It's about turnips.
I will stick the links.
It's good. But I worked out why it's about turnips. I'd completely forgotten. When I was talking to John Blanche and his compatriots, when they were designing Mordheim, they were always talking about fish. And it was like a design language. It's like, oh no, if you need a space to fill, put a fish on it. They're all fish based, they'll be on shields and things. And so I must have just subconsciously gone, root vegetables. Yeah, just use that. So whenever there's a thing to fill, like Todd on his backpack, needs something hanging off it, it's a sacred parsnip that he loves dearly. Maybe it's lucky, maybe it prevents him from being shot. Like that sort of stuff. And I'm from now on, I do this for all my projects. It's like you think of something innocuous that people would just have in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then add it in and fill gaps with it, like in brains. Like if they've got a button or a badge or something, give it heraldry, give it a sense of history and oddness to it, which I really enjoy now. So yeah, you should. It's very unelfy. I don't think there's any.
Very unelfy, yeah.
But it's nice.
It's really nice to we are a young company. We're only 3 years old or whatever we are now, something like that, 3-4 years old. And one of the things we've wanted to do from the start was bring people a lot through with us. When we started Cult of Paint, the idea was that we were here for the long term. It wasn't a make a quick buck teaching or whatever. It was, there were foundations of projects that you haven't even seen yet, but have been in motion. Andy said the other day on another interview, if we
some
said
exciting stuff coming.
We'll do it. Yeah, and it's been really enjoyable to see you come through as an artist from a relatively similar starting time. And as you look at your artwork across that time and you can see the development of it. And then this has been such a fun chat to hear you talk about, how you approach the projects. And then you saying, oh, now I'm introducing, these everyday items into my artwork, and for each project and things like that. It is very unelf-like, and another thing that is very unelf-like is, of course, dwarves, which there's been a growing demand for as we've done these live streams, much to Andy's disappointment. So I think we'll talk about this a little bit more on Saturday when we're going to do a longer live stream with a few different people dropping in. But we're going to talk a little bit about future projects, including a future project that we're working on with Max at the moment, for some more elves and whatnot. But
they're really good. Like, I'm really happy. No, seriously, this isn't just like a plug. Like these latest ones, they designed. I think I've nailed it. Like, it may have taken all these other designs, but like, I'm really happy with these.
Is that latest design the elf that's quite short, squat, and bearded?
No. I like elves. I've kind of grown into them now. Like at the start, I was like, not really interested, but now I kind of like them. It's bad. It's infectious.
It's good. I hope over the years, as we're determined to do now, where we will explore the Deorgard setting, and we explore those other races that are within that setting. But yeah, we're not quite finished with the elves just yet. So
I'm never finished.
We'll have you on a whatever this show becomes after the campaign. I'm sure we'll have you on again, Max, to have a natter about projects and things like that. But just hang on, one more question. Kane says future projects should include an elf riding a dinosaur. Love the next thing, Kane.
I'd like to do like a paleo art style, like an actual modern dinosaur, like a contemporary looking one. So with the feathers, with the nice, like mottled, like an actual animal, not a big monster. Like work that in, like prehistoric elfy. I think that's never been done before, and that would look amazing. Because modern dinosaurs, like modern raptors, are really sleek and hawk-like, which is very elfy. Like a Utahraptor, maybe, or I don't know, maybe a mini microraptor. So now
you're getting an inside scoop of how we work on projects.
This is basically how it works.
Yeah. But no, thanks ever so much for coming on, Max. It's been really good fun, man. I'm gonna enjoy listening to this one back as well. I think it's
I'll never listen to anything I say.
Right, my cup of tea. No, I love this. And thanks everyone for dropping in and chatting, asking those questions. The support for the live stream's been wicked, as it has for the whole project. We've hit another stretch goal today, unlocked another one. We've chucked up a few more. So we've got, other than the fact that the Woodsman's now getting a limited 75mm version as well as a
really?
Forest Giant type model, which few people asked for. We're also going to be doing the axe as an option for him as a bust, if we can get to that goal and unlock it. Quite a few people asked for that. And a few more freebies. We think a lot of them artwork based. So thanks for the support, guys. We've got 5 days left to run on the campaign. We just want to see what we can do with it now, really. So, if you haven't pledged and you're sort of on the fence, jump in. If you pledge now, it gives us the opportunity to unlock other things, basically, and share it. That we are just like Max's Turnip project, and just like this, we're a niche within a niche hobby. The way word gets out is by sharing it. So check out the YouTube channel, which you're obviously on, but check out the Patreon, check out the Instagram, the Twitter, all the rest of it. We want to engage with you guys more and know what you're after, so we can produce it, basically. So yeah, thanks for coming along for the ride. Thanks again, Max. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, mate.
That's good fun, mate. I like these ones where we can just sit and listen.
It's good, isn't it?
Especially after 3 years.
We will see you all on Wednesday for the stream, 7 o'clock GMT. Me and Andy will be having a chat, as we often do, and Andy will be working on more of the Skeletend model. I think you're doing the skin. Was it you were doing this one?
Oh, I can't wait to see that. That's gonna look so good.
Skin. I reckon I could do the skin and the hair.
Skin and the hair.
I'm not a wizard. I'm not a wizard. Maybe a warlock. Maybe a sorcerer. No, I've not learned anything.
But yeah, join us for that. And we look forward to seeing you there, and we'll see you at the end of the week for some fun on Saturday as well. So thanks, guys. Take care.